Welcome to episode 34 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I am your host, Matt Harmon, joined in studio by my good friend, my colleague, and the man who is currently introducing young skulls of mush to the beauties of the Greek language, John Sloat.
And turning what solid pieces of brain they have to mush currently.
Yes, indeed. Yes. You are in the throes of beginning Greek with students here at Grace College and Theological Seminary.
Yeah, you can feel the fear in the room. It's something else.
Yeah, the deer in headlights look.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting. I know we talked about this last episode, but how much of, you talk about learning the languages, and I think what catches a lot of students off guard when they start learning the languages is they realize how little English they actually know in terms of like grammar.
Yes.
When you start talking about, oh, well, this is an active verb or a passive verb, or this is a subject or a direct object or the object of a preposition, and it's like you see the wheels spinning to get their minds around it in Greek or in English before they can then process in Greek what that is.
Yeah, I know for me when I took it, it was like, okay, I need to dust off the things I learned in like the 6th or 7th grade.
Yeah.
And some of that stuff seems to be going on right now for them. And they're like, oh shoot, I gotta relearn some of this.
Yes. Yeah. So we want to welcome in our listeners. If you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter at V&S You can email us, variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. We have a Facebook page, Various and Sundry Podcast. You can find us there. And if you really want to do us a favor, you can go on to the podcast app and leave us a 5-star rating.
Yeah.
And a nice review would be also greatly appreciated.
As Mr. Smith did this week.
Yes, indeed. So shout out to Mr. Smith, our one new review this week. We're grateful for that. So John, what's going on in the world of sports here?
Well, I mean, the same that's been going on the last couple of weeks, right? So the NBA playoffs are going on in the bubble in Orlando. No problems as far as I can tell.
Yeah, that's my understanding. That no positive tests from what I gather, and basketball makes it a little easier. Smaller than a baseball team, obviously way smaller than a football team.
Sure.
Contained environment, not allowed to be out and about. They're confined to the bubble.
Yeah, and it's and they're in the midst of the playoffs. A couple games, a couple series in the first round have already ended. There were sweeps there.
Yep.
And everything seems to be going really smoothly. I think all of our picks are still alive.
Yeah. Now we're recording on Monday afternoon, and this episode will launch next day on Tuesday. So we both wait, in the West, did you pick the Clippers?
I did.
You did. So we both picked the Clippers.
Both picked the Clippers.
And that series is 2-2 now because Luka Doncic is insane. I forget what his exact numbers were yesterday, but it was something like, I want to say it was like 43 points, 17 rebounds, and 16 assists, or some absurd thing like that, and including the game-winning step-back 3 in overtime.
Yeah, I have him at 43 points, 17 rebounds, and 13 assists.
13 assists, okay. So they're giving the Clippers all they can handle at this point. And I do think it is an interesting phenomenon when you take away the home court advantage, because there is no home court advantage in the bubble. And I think when you combine that with the lack of travel, so you're not ending a game at 10:30 at night, doing the media, getting on a plane at 1 a.m., flying across the country, getting in at 5 a.m., getting to the hotel, and then going to a shoot around at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for all those dynamics gone.
Yeah, those are terrible dynamics too.
Yeah, and when you add into the fact, like if you've watched these games in the bubble, the backgrounds are solid largely. And so for a shooting background, for those who aren't big basketball fans, like these are really good shooting backgrounds, meaning that there's less distraction behind the basket and stuff, such that it makes it easier and more consistent to shoot. And so I think that's part of the reason why offensive numbers are up. And you combine that with players not traveling, so they're not as tired, physically fatigued. You take away the advantage of your home crowd giving you energy and momentum. And I think this is interesting. It's been pretty much proven that home crowds can influence officials, right?
Absolutely, yeah. There's absolutely a hometown bias there, or
right.
the
So
crowd influence,
as a
or something
general
like that.
rule, you get more calls on your home floor. Well, there is no home floor anymore.
So you think it's a more evenly called game as you're watching them?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I think all of those factors do make for the possibility that you will see some very surprising results. And one potentially surprising result is the Jazz are up 3-1 on the Nuggets. So the Nuggets are the 3 seed, Jazz are the 6 seed, and Jazz are up 3-1.
Yeah, the Jazz have Donovan Mitchell though, and
Yeah.
he's a blossoming superstar. It feels like in the NBA.
Yes.
I'm trying to think. Other than the Joker, who does Denver even have? They
Jamal Murray, he's their other big guy.
Is he the
he put up 50. He put up 50 in, is it yesterday's game? Yeah. I think it's the most recent game.
Is that the one they won?
No, they lost.
Okay.
Both he and Mitchell went for 50 plus in that game.
Oh my goodness gracious! But yeah, it feels like Donovan Mitchell, and Donovan Mitchell has a Mets connection that really excites me.
Doesn't he have a relative that works for the Mets?
Yeah, his dad works for the Mets.
Okay.
And has, I think, for years.
Okay.
And so I really enjoy Donovan Mitchell. He wears Mets gear to Jazz games, which inspires me.
Warms your heart. Yeah.
So I'm a big Donovan Mitchell fan.
Okay. So I have been enjoying the playoffs. I do think that it is a nice thing to it's kind of bizarre because of the way they've been doing it. 4 games a day, and they start at 1:30 in the afternoon.
Yeah, there's
basketball.
what time's the first game today?
Well, I think even as we're recording here, we've got a game about to start. So these games are starting at 1:30 in the afternoon. You've got basketball from 1:30 all the way till essentially like 11:30 or midnight.
If I was a college student right now, I'd be loving this. If I didn't have like a full-time job that I was doing things all afternoon, I think I'd be in the dorm watching a lot of basketball.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how these things develop, some of these series. Raptors and Celtics have moved on. Mm-hmm. Heat are about to sweep the Pacers, or they're up 3-0, I guess, so should probably finish it.
Yeah.
In any case, I've been enjoying that, and we should probably check in on your Mets. What's happened to your Mets, John?
Yeah, so they played really well against the Marlins last week. Won, I think they won 3 games, and then they got 2 cases of COVID. The word is 1 player, 1 coach got COVID. They quarantined them, and no other players in the last 3 days have tested positive. So they're resuming play on Tuesday.
Okay.
And even though baseball has had some hiccups with COVID, like with the Mets or with the Marlins earlier, or the
Cardinals, yeah.
Overall, it's still gone pretty well. I mean, you had to expect some positive test results if you were going to do it the way baseball is currently doing it.
Yes.
Sorry, there's some horns outside. But overall, I think it's worked pretty well. It's maybe not gone as well as basketball.
No, but in some ways that's an unfair comparison because you've got smaller teams, fewer teams. And you've got them clearly in a bubble. Like they're not traveling. They're all confined.
Baseball's trying to do a full season, quotes. 60 games where basketball's doing I think it was 7 or 8 games and then the playoffs.
Yes.
That seems much more doable than a full season.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. College football, Big 12, ACC, SEC still moving ahead with plans for the season. Big 10 and Pac-12 have pulled the plug despite parent protests. Parents from most of the different Big 10 schools protested outside the Big 10 office.
Really?
To get football reinstated.
So I know a pastor in Pittsburgh whose son is a freshman offensive lineman for Purdue. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if he was one of the parents because I've seen his Facebook post and he is unhappy the Big Ten is not playing.
Yeah. Well, there were media reports that apparently privately the commissioner of the Big Ten, Kevin Warren, who is new to the post within the last 6 months.
Oh gosh.
Welcome to the job.
Yeah.
Here's a global pandemic. But basically admitted privately, I didn't think that this would cause so much controversy, me canceling the season. Which, if that's true, he's an idiot.
Really?
If that's true, he's an idiot and is unqualified for the job. Honestly, if you didn't think canceling the season would cause controversy, and one of the latest wrinkles was apparently the athletic directors of the different schools were not in the meeting to discuss the cancellation of the season. It was university presidents and the medical experts and the commissioner. And so apparently almost all of the ADs wanted to play, which makes sense.
Sure, yeah.
And so it's the Big Ten has officially become a dumpster fire at the top levels of the leadership.
You know who could have gotten those games happening is if you had the CFOs of those universities with the presidents.
Yeah.
And they said, here's how much money you're going to lose if you cancel the season.
Yeah.
I think that would have changed some presidents' minds.
But surely the presidents can't be that naive to how much money they just flushed down the toilet.
Well, the commissioner doesn't seem to think that, this is just some sort of fall fund that we have out there. It's not $1 million thing that people live and die on, you know.
Anyway, I'll get too salty if we keep talking about that too much. But are we actually ready here to move on to our main topic for the day?
I think so. Our Q&A episode.
It's finally here.
It's here, and we have 6, 7 questions.
Yeah.
That we're comfortable with answering on the air.
Yeah. Now, in fairness, we did get more questions than this, but some of the questions that you submitted as listeners violated rule number 1 of the podcast.
Don't get fired.
Don't get fired. Mm-hmm. And so we vetoed those, as we are wont to do.
As well as some of them were pretty intricate
yes.
in answering, and we didn't want to go down that rabbit hole because we didn't necessarily, and it may have violated rule number 1 eventually.
Yes. Now there was one that we're not going to answer today because we're strongly considering turning it into its own episode. So, do you want to?
Yeah, I think that was Chase Ringler who submitted that. So Chase, don't be offended that your question isn't out here, but we'll
it was so good we thought we could make a whole episode out of it. So, in any case, let's start with a softball.
Okay.
This is a question from. Do you remember who this is from?
I think it's from your son.
That's what I thought. Jake in Ohio, or Jake in Indiana. Jake who wishes he was in Ohio. Asks, who came up with the podcast idea?
Well, it was him, wasn't it?
He likes to think so. And in fairness, he and his friend Landon did have a role. But, I mean, we do go into this. We'll give the short answer to this because we talk about this in episode 0. So if you're new to the podcast, you might want to go back and check out episode 0 to see a little bit more about this. But basically, this podcast grew out of our Sunday afternoon conversations, watching sports of various kinds on Sunday afternoons after eating clunch, which is Kate's lunch. My wife, Kate, makes a delightful lunch after church involving breakfast foods. And so a lot of those conversations cover the kind of topics we talk about in the podcast. Sports, theology, culture, books we're reading, travel, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And so both Jake and his friend Landon were, as they would sit and listen and participate to some degree.
Which I didn't even know they were listening to us most of the time.
At one point they said, you guys should do a podcast and it should be this, you guys talking about these different things. So they get some partial credit. Not full credit, but partial credit.
Where do you give the rest of the credit to?
I think we had actually talked about that idea as a possibility before. Or at least I had tossed it out as you ever think about doing a podcast? I think we could do a podcast. but this sort of crystallized it, having some outside.
Well, and then I think I was skeptical the whole time we were planning to do this, and just to put my cards on the table, I thought, who's really going to listen to us? And I was like, if we get 50 downloads a week, I'll be happy. I think that's kind of where I was at.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, we simply blow that out of the water.
Yeah.
On a weekly basis.
It's been fun. So, yeah. Next question?
Yeah. I think next question. I'll ask this question. And our questions are really all over the map.
Hence, this is the Various and Sundry podcast, so here we go.
Matt Harmon, was Isaiah 40 to 66 written sometime after Isaiah 1 to 39?
Yeah, so for our listeners who may not fully grasp what that question is trying to get at is...
Isaiah is a book of the Bible.
Well, yeah, I hope most of our listeners know that. In the academy, in scholarly circles, it is a widely held belief, scholarly view, that Isaiah 1 through 39 was written at one point in history, perhaps even by the prophet Isaiah, and then chapters 40 through 66 were written by someone else a couple hundred years later in this view. And so this listener, I think this is Chris in Indiana, who sent this. Yeah? No? I thought
it was Austin Kaufman.
Oh, okay. Well.
Sorry, I'm using last names. I shouldn't use last names.
Maybe it's Austin in Indiana.
Austin in Indiana.
Yeah, there you go. In any case, I am fully convinced that the prophet Isaiah wrote the entire thing. But it should be noted that when it comes to sort of these prophetic books, they are usually a collection of different prophetic oracles that the prophet gave throughout the course of his life, rather than necessarily being a continuous narrative of, maybe written at one particular point in the prophet's life, more of a towards the close of the prophet's life, they were gathered together and organized in certain forms. And so I think that I do think Isaiah wrote all 66 chapters, but it is entirely possible that these prophetic oracles came from different points in his life and ministry. And I think the biggest thing that people push back on is some of the predictive prophecy that is in chapters 40 through 66 that seems like, well, how is Isaiah really announcing 100 plus, 200 plus years in advance certain things that are going to happen? And my answer is, yeah.
And there is a pretty sharp divide there between 39 and 40. I think scholars, for the most part, agree that there's a shift in writing there.
There is, though that is often overplayed. But there is a somewhat of a shift there in terms of tone and emphasis, and the move from more emphasis on God's impending judgment and exile coming, and then in chapter 40 there tends to be more of a shift towards God's going to bring restoration.
And however, a shift does not necessarily mean new author,
right,
which seems to be a kind of a theme when we're looking at critical scholars who want to break things apart. Like if there's any shift, it's a change in authorship all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And you see it with Paul's work and people that are questioning that, is that anytime there's a shift in writing, they question it. And I just don't think that's the case. We can write differently. We can intentionally sit down and write from a different perspective.
And I do think that it is important to recognize that critical scholars often are driven by a pretty strong anti-supernatural bent or bias.
Sure.
That it immediately dismisses the possibility of predictive prophecy, of someone announcing in advance something that's going to happen and it actually happening.
Sure.
So I think that's helpful to note. So this third one's for you, John, singling you out.
Okay.
So here we go. John, please talk more about being a Jets fan. Why are you a fan? What does it mean to be a fan through the thick and thin? Why have you chosen this road of misery, John?
Yeah. I'm going to expand that out to include my baseball team and my basketball team as well.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I feel like I can talk about them all pretty similarly.
Yeah.
Jets, Mets, Knicks.
When was the last time there was a championship in that batch?
The last time?
Yeah.
1986. Like a
Like, I'm not talking like winning the division or winning the conference. I'm talking about
Super
winning
Bowl,
the
World Series, or
NBA championship.
NBA championship. Yeah, 86. The Mets. Or 86. The Mets won the World Series, which is 2 years before I was born.
Yeah. So in your lifetime, your
never seen any
three
of those.
most cherished teams have never won a ultimate championship.
That's correct. I've seen the Mets at the World Series twice, so
Yeah.
2000 and 2015.
Yeah.
So like clockwork, every 15 years or so.
So we only had 10 more years to go, John.
Yeah, and then the Jets I've seen in the AFC Championship game 3 times,
Yep.
and the Knicks I've seen in the playoffs a few times that I can remember. They went to the '94 championship, but I don't remember that championship.
And even that finals appearance was completely eclipsed by
the
O.J.
Yes.
Simpson mess. Him
Yes.
being wanted for murder and
Yeah.
the chase and all of that.
Those are actually some of my earliest memories, is my mom watching the O.J. trial. Anyway, I vividly remember my mom watching the O.J. trial. It's all based on where I'm from. I'm
Sure.
born Long Island, and left when I was young, 7, 8 years old, something like that. But my I kind of picked up the teams my dad had, and
Yep.
they were Mets, Jets, and Knicks. Now my dad, my goodness, I mean, he's seen the Knicks win a couple championships. He's seen the Mets win a couple championships, and he's seen he would have seen Joe Namath win the championship in '69. So
Yeah.
he's had a much different experience than I have in watching them.
Sure.
But yeah, I think I'm just stubbornly committed, and we've talked about this before. I enjoy being unique but not different. Like, I like having this little thing that's a little bit different than everybody else, but not weird. And I think one of those things is that I root for teams that nobody else in my area root for. So
Yeah.
Jets, Mets, Knicks, and it's fun to run across somebody else who roots for them. I actually can't remember the last time I met another Knicks fan. But every now and then I run into a Jets fan. Every now and then I run into a Mets fan, and those are always really, really joyful conversations about those teams. But yeah, so that's why is my family rooted for them and still does.
So talk a little bit about the whole thick and thin piece of it. Like, what is it like to be a fan of franchises that at the moment, and really throughout the course of your life, you've had some of these little, spikes where they're
moments of greatness,
where they're
yeah.
good, where they're really good, like championship contender good.
Well, I would say even when the Jets made the AFC Championship in probably the last 10 years, 10 or 12 years, they made it twice, and those were surprises.
Yeah.
Like the team during the regular season, you went, "Oh my gosh, they're sort of 500. Oh, they barely made the playoffs," and then it's like, "Watch out!" It was one of those moments. It's hard to describe, and it's hard to describe to somebody who's a Buckeyes fan whose team is constantly in the top 5.
We'll circle back to that point in just a minute. I'll let you continue.
Because you're kind of constantly rooting for them, but also rooting against the owner, because all 3 teams have pretty terrible owners, and so you want them. And you're like, "Come on, sell the team."
Yeah.
And you're like, if they're just bad enough, they'll sell the team, and then we can be really great if we get the right ownership in there. But despite how mediocre we've been over the past 10 years or so, it hasn't happened. So the Mets are on the brink of a sale, though. Hopefully it happens in the next couple months, and we can move on. But Yeah, it's kind of rooting for them and kind of rooting against them at the same time, because you're like, goodness, we could really use, a really excellent draft pick, or, the commissioner to come in and say, you need to sell the team now, or, something like that.
Yeah.
But do you want to comment on the Buckeyes real quick and constantly being in the top 5?
Yeah, because I will. Part of my rebuttal to that is absolutely since 2001, they have been amazing.
So the last 20 years, basically.
Last 20 years, which is a great stretch. It's arguably the best stretch of Ohio State football. Now, again, they've won 2 national titles in that window. There was a stretch back in like the 50s and 60s where they won more national titles, but I would argue it's way harder to win national titles today than it was back then. In any case, I grew up with a team that, basically from my high school years, the 90s, the John Cooper era of Ohio State football, where they went through a 13-year stretch where they beat Michigan twice. And almost every year in that 13-year window, on paper, Ohio State had the better team. And the number of times where Ohio State was undefeated going into the Michigan game and just needed to beat them to go on to play for a national title, there must have been at least 3 or maybe 4 at times in the 90s where that happened.
But that's still consistent, good teams.
It is. But here's the thing. Because college football is different, that's the season breaker. It's not like the NFL where your Jets can lose twice to the Patriots and still make the playoffs and have a successful year. Ohio State loses to Michigan, and that's it. Their year's done, typically. Like, yeah, they can go off and win a bowl game or something, but they can't compete for a championship.
Yeah.
So part of that is just the different nature. So I had to endure the years where Ohio State would consistently lose to Michigan. And now my children have grown up in a period where that almost never happens. Like my youngest son, Jake, is 19. Twice in his lifetime, Ohio State has lost to Michigan. Twice.
Has your son, Jake, ever known the Buckeyes to be unranked, out of the top 25?
Yes. There was the year after, the year before Urban Meyer took over. And there was the mess with the Tattoo Gate scandal.
Oh, yeah.
Junk. And they were 6-6, lost their bowl game to go 6-7. So the year before
they
Urban
fell
Meyer,
out of the top 25.
They were out of the top 25. And then the next year they were on a bowl ban, ran the table, went undefeated, but couldn't play in a bowl. So, but yeah. So I'm not putting it on the same level as the misery of the Jets and Mets and the Knicks, but I am intimately familiar with having your entire season thrown away because your more talented team can't win the most important game on their schedule.
But none of my teams are more talented. None of them are more talented.
Fair enough. I won't.
They are all mired in mediocrity.
I won't debate that.
And subpar performances.
Okay. So this is sort of in that same realm. The next one is
favorite sports
if you had to
moment?
name one or maybe several, what was your favorite moment in sports, or several that are your favorite?
I thought about this a little bit. I think watching Eli Manning lead the charge with the helmet catch of David Tyree against the Patriots in the Super Bowl in their undefeated season. But
it was the Giants.
I know. It's not my team.
One of the rivals of your beloved Jets.
I know, but it was such a euphoric moment to watch.
Your
the
hatred
Patriots.
of the Patriots overcame that. Okay. Yeah.
And I think about it as like, what's the greatest sports moment I've lived through? I'm thinking that might be it. Watching that comeback happen, and that might be it.
Okay.
I was thinking about it earlier, and I think that might be the best one I can think of.
Okay.
How about yourself?
Well, I've got 3. It's our show. We can do what we want. So if you want to come back and add some more, you're welcome to do that. I'm going to go with 2 Ohio State ones. Okay. The first is winning the national championship with that 2001 team that came out of nowhere, went 13-0 in the regular season, and was a double-digit underdog to Miami of Florida and beat them in double overtime.
Yeah.
That was an unexpected national championship.
Cornerback blitz?
To be sure. The other one was Ohio State, their national championship team, the one they won it in the 2014 regular season, 2015 championship playoff. But not the title game. It was when they beat Alabama in the national semifinals. And there was an iconic moment in that game where Ohio State was not given a chance, okay? Not really given much of a chance. I don't know if they were double-digit underdogs, but they were probably close, at least a touchdown. And Ohio State had rallied all the way back, taken the lead, and but Bama had all the momentum, had Ohio State pinned deep much of the fourth quarter, and then there is one of the most iconic plays in all of Ohio State football history was the 85-yard touchdown run by Ezekiel Elliott, where he busted through the left side and outran everybody to the end zone. It's one of the most iconic moments in Ohio State football history. And then the third one was from my experience at Lakeland Christian, being a part of the team that being a part of the coaching staff and having my son on the team when we won our first sectional game in program history a few years ago. That was a pretty special moment.
I'll add one.
Okay.
So we live in northern Indiana. The baseball team of choice here is probably the Chicago Cubs.
Yeah.
Probably the majority of the people here are Cubs fans.
Yeah.
And in the playoffs, the Mets played the Cubs.
That was back in 2015, right?
2015.
Yeah.
And Aaron Crabtree, who I was working for at the time, is a big Cubs fan. We did not talk through the series. And
we had a Cubs fan in our life group.
Yes, a dear friend of mine.
A dear friend of ours who, but you guys at least were talking.
We were having conversation, but I mean to beat them and see the joy drain from their face was pretty memorable.
Yeah.
And seeing Daniel Murphy hit all those home runs against the Cubs was fantastic.
Yeah. Next question. Ready?
Yeah.
Should we as Christians listen to Bethel and Hillsong music?
Do you want this one? Do you want to go first? Or you want me to?
I'll let you take the lead on this.
Okay. I think we might have a little difference of opinion on this one, or probably degree. I think we probably shouldn't, but at the same time, I'm not sure it's a hill I'm willing to die on.
Okay.
How about yourself?
Yeah, I'll probably push a little further, and I will make the distinction. I absolutely do not think that we should be using their music in worship services. And not so much that the songs themselves are necessarily questionable theologically.
But we don't want to be pointing people towards those ministries.
Exactly. Yeah. When you find out more about their ministries, there's some goofy stuff going on in both the Bethel camp and the Hillsong camp. And so I'd be a little hesitant to point people towards that. And so that makes me hesitant then to recommend their music or promote singing it, especially in a worship service.
Yeah.
So I think we're largely on the same page. I think I'm probably maybe a little bit more forceful.
Yeah, I think and that's what I meant when I said I think we're at different spots. I'm more on I don't think we should, but it's not something I'm going to really strongly advocate for.
Yeah, I'm not willing to die on that hill, but I might take some shots. I'm willing to take a little punishment on the hill, maybe.
Next question.
Yeah.
I better ask you this one because it's directed at you. What are Dr. Harmon's laments is how the question's framed, about soccer. And what rules would he change to make it better?
Yeah.
Did you add that question in?
I did not.
No. Okay, because I know you have specific rule
I do,
improvements. So
I think a couple things frustrate me about soccer. I think that more so perhaps than any other sport, the team that is better loses more often than in other sports. Because of the nature of soccer, it feels to me like I've seen enough soccer matches at the high school level and then at the like World Cup and Olympic level where it seems like one team is better, more skilled, better players, but can't seem to break through and score. And then they have one breakdown where the other team gets a guy out in front and they score. And so the better team, even though they dominate the entire game, ends up losing the game. I don't tend to like sports like that. I don't tend to like situations like that.
That's probably why you like college football, because the higher seed wins so regularly.
The better team tends to win, yes, more consistently. The other thing I don't like is the fact that you can play forever and still end up 0-0.
Yeah, tying's a tough part of that game.
Yeah, and that you get to points where it's, okay, we're giving up on actually trying to play the game anymore, and now we're just going to have penalty kicks to see who wins, which to me is crazy. Because it would be like playing a basketball game for, 4 or 5 overtimes and then deciding this is enough. Get your best free throw, get 5 guys, they each take 1 free throw. Whoever makes more free throws wins. What is that? What is that?
Yeah.
So I'm not a fan. Okay, so rule changes. Okay, you ready for this?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard these before, but lay them on me.
I'm going to give my radical one and my less radical one.
Okay.
The radical one would be to eliminate offsides. Just eliminate it. If you want to send somebody back there to cherry pick and play behind the defense, let it happen.
That's your radical one?
That's my radical one.
I think that's less radical than your other one.
You think so?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll let the listeners be the judge. My other one is to bring a little basketball influence into the game of soccer.
This is radical.
I think that, in basketball you have, front court and back court, and once you get the ball into the front court, you cannot take the ball into the back court. It's a violation, it's a turnover if you do that.
Sure.
Let's bring that into soccer. So once the ball is advanced into the front half of the field on offense, to not be able to intentionally kick the ball back into the back half of the field to reset and to reorganize the offense, I think that would compress the field. I think it would create more turnovers and create more fast break action.
It would be very exciting. Yeah.
I think it would increase the intensity and excitement of the game.
I think that's radical.
You think so?
I think some purists are going to be...
Well, I've already lost the purist, John. I've already lost the purist, so...
And those are the questions we could answer.
There you go. Those are the ones that don't violate the rule number 1 of the podcast. So are we ready to move on to Athlete, episode 34 here?
I think so. You want to walk us through them?
Yeah, sure. So a few running backs from the NFL. Walter Payton.
85 Bears.
Yes. Thurman Thomas. Bo Jackson. So pretty solid.
Yeah, solid group there.
Yep. In the world of the NBA, Shaquille O'Neal did wear 34. We discussed him a little bit under number 32 as well. So
yeah,
Hakeem Olajuwon, who was a dominant center in the 90s.
For the Rockets.
Yeah. And then in the world of baseball, Bryce Harper and Kirby Puckett. Kirby Puckett, Twins legend and a guy that if you walked past him on the street, you'd never guess he was a professional athlete. He did not have the professional athlete build. Shorter guy, kind of chubby looking. And so, you'd never guess he was as athletic maybe as he actually was.
Great name, though. Kirby Puckett.
Absolutely. So, and then for Ohio State, 2 running backs, Raymont Harris from the 90s. Noteworthy running back. And then more recently, Carlos Hyde, running back from 2010 to 2013.
I always enjoyed Carlos Hyde.
Still plays in the NFL.
Yeah.
A good, solid NFL running back, nicknamed El Guapo.
El Guapo.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a solid runner. I mean, isn't going to, at the NFL level, isn't going to bust a long run, but isn't going to lose you yardage either.
Yeah, absolutely. So who you like here, John?
Well, if we, I moved to eliminate all baseball players from this list.
So moved?
So I don't like Bryce Harper. And Kirby Puckett, I'm good to get rid of.
Okay, that's fine. It's fine.
Basketball players, if I'm picking between the two of them, I'm picking Hakeem Olajuwon.
Yeah.
You okay with that?
I'm very okay with that.
Eliminating Shaq.
Yep.
Okay. And then running backs, I'm okay eliminating Thurman Thomas.
Yeah, I think he was a little underappreciated. He was on those Bills teams in the 90s that went to the 4 straight Super Bowls. Good runner, good pass catcher out of the backfield, but not on the same level in terms of the other two.
So that leaves us with Walter Payton, Bo Jackson, Hakeem Olajuwon.
Yeah.
Who do you Who do you like? I'll put it on you.
Yeah, I think I'm debating between Walter Payton and Bo Jackson. I mean, Walter Payton was, I think when he retired, he was the all-time leading rusher in NFL history.
Yeah.
Was, a staple of the Bears franchise for many years there and carried them because they almost never had a passing attack.
And I believe was a fairly high-character individual as well. I think there's a Walter Payton Man of the Year award.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's out there now.
But then you got Bo Jackson.
Who played 2 sports.
Yeah, and was freakishly athletic. I mean, we throw that term around, but there's a 30 for 30 on Bo Jackson, and it is fascinating because he was not one of these guys that was freakish because he, threw himself into the weight room and did all, like, he was just naturally working with a different set of athleticism than anybody at the time.
Yeah. And his career ended at the same time on one play, correct? Where
yes.
I believe his hip got out of socket or something along those
Yep.
lines.
Kind of a freakish, and when you look at the when you look at the replay of it, it doesn't look like the kind of hit that you think that just ended his career.
Well, if I remember right, I'm reaching back to the 30 for 30 here, but a guy had his leg, and he was so strong that he just basically pulled it out. In the moment there.
Yeah.
He really ended up doing it to himself. His freakish talent and athletic ability really hurt him.
Yeah. So are we – you want to go with Bo or –
I love Bo.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Bo's a great
Let's do
pick.
it. We're going with Bo.
Bo Jackson.
All right. One thing you like.
Okay, so we're back to school this last week, and
Yep.
so things are crazy again. It's been weird to have people on campus. But one tradition that remained despite COVID is myself and another faculty member on campus, Pat Loebs, lead something called The Hike, which welcomes freshmen to our campus. And it looked different, a little bit different this year than past years, but it was still done. It was a good day. It was beautiful out. We had them race cardboard boats on the lake that they made.
That's kind of the culminating event.
That's the culminating event, but they're doing a scavenger hunt all over campus, and I get the honor of being part of the leadership team on that. So that's a lot of fun year after year to do. So that happened this week, and it's always fun to watch a new class of freshmen go through that.
Yeah. So my one thing is going to be along similar lines, and that's simply being back in the classroom with my Greek students. So this current group of second-year Greek students I didn't have them fall semester last year because you taught beginning
That's
Greek
right.
1 and 2. So I had them for beginning Greek 3 and then one in-person class period of Greek exegesis before we shut things down for COVID. So it is great to be back in the classroom with them and just reconnecting with them and having discussions about the Greek text. We're in Galatians. I'm really enjoying that. And seeing some of those light bulbs turn on for them, seeing them actually get to put into use the Greek that they have labored so hard to acquire, and see them realizing, oh, okay, so this is why we did all this, so we can do that. Like, yeah, That's why. Do you see the benefit now? Yes, I do. So that's just a very meaningful kind of a rewarding experience as a faculty.
Well, good.
Yeah. Well, by nature, right? When you do a Q&A episode, you're definitely covering various and sundry topics.
Yeah, we were really all over the map today.
Yeah. So I'm ready to call mission accomplished if you are.
Yep. What's the other option? To just keep going?
Yeah, I mean, other podcasts do that. But
yes,
we won't. We know that our time is up. So if you want to, again, connect with us on social media, we'd love to hear from you. But until next time, the Lord bless you all real good.
Later.